For the gesture structure hybrid drawing, we're going to do something that's more sensible. The structure drawings can be a difficult way to start a drawing. I had you do them that way, and I'm doing it now, like in the middle of the guitar, in the middle of the crutch. I had you do it that way though, because I want to emphasize that way of seeing. And if you combine it with something else, you don't see it in its purest form. So we did the more difficult thing first, just to emphasize what was going on, which was like, okay, here's the guitar, here's the crutch. And this is forcing you to see these deeper compositional structural relationships, this flat screen information that I want you looking at. But it's a pretty difficult way to start a drawing. I mean, maybe like seeing a triangle would be a good way to start a drawing and then move on from there. What we're going to do now, though, is combine the notational gestural drawing that we worked on a few assignments ago. So we'll start a drawing that way. Go fast, go responsive. Don't take more than a minute to get everything on there, which is what I'm going to try to do now while I'm talking. Difficult to do this while you're talking. And then combine that. Once I get everything on there, I'm going to combine that. I'm going to slow down and combine it with structural looking, not necessarily structural drawing, but structural looking, to try and fix any errors that I made. So the structure drawing that we did, it's really a way of looking that you're going to be able to use to go back and fix your errors. And this is mostly flat screen stuff. Right now, I'm being more responsive, but when I slow down to fix everything, then it's a flat screen way of looking where I'm just assessing relationships across a drawing. I'm not even going to get a lot of detail into that thing. Alright, so I've got the image on there now. We'll get the blanket. Remember, this should always be happening within a picture plane as well, because I can use like the distance from the picture plane. I can use these shapes, which we'll deal with next time, called negative spaces. I can use those to help me check a drawing. Okay, I got it on there real quick. Let me go ahead and lighten this a little bit. You should be doing these drawings with your 6H pencils. Those are your lightest pencils, and you want to start your drawing light. When you're doing this type of drawing, you also don't ever want to erase. If I've made an error, it's helpful to be able to compare the error. That's a good slogan. Compare the error to the image over here, and then use the error to shift. Like if I realize that this thing needs to be taller, it's easier to say, well, it's this much taller, and fix it. If I erase out what was there, then I'm pretty likely to just repeat the same mistake. Because at this point, remember, when you're doing these notational drawings, you're just letting your hand-eye coordination and your system respond to the stimulus in front of you. Your system's pretty likely to have the same response the next time. So if you erase something out and do it again, you're pretty likely to make the same mistake. If you leave the mistake, then you're way more likely to fix it. Okay, notice when I did this, I did not like spend a whole bunch of time on each object doing this tight little like outline drawing. We don't want to do that. That's a lot of work that we would have to erase. Like if I need to move this thing over, I want to be able to just go and move it over that way. Or if I want to move it that way, I want to move it that way. I want to be able to do this quick. I did this drawing in about a minute or so, and then I would just spend no more than 10 minutes refining it. So as I'm going now, I'm going to go and check myself. I think it's pretty well proportioned. But I'm going to now combine this loose gestural drawing, but while I'm doing that, I'm paying more attention to structural stuff. So I might even do like some of this where I just let my eye go over, check something, and come back. So I go over and I check, and I see that, yeah, that lines up to this part here. Great. Got that. Here I'll see that this touches there, and it's about, yeah, lined up with the bottom of where the strings plug in. And then there's a bulb there, there's a bulge there. And then it needs to be a little bit taller. And when I do that, I'm mentally checking that distance. So you can make those lines. It's all pretty much one flow of drawing, but I check that line. Yeah, that looks pretty good. That distance there. Then about that far over is where one of those pins is. So that tells me a little bit more about where the headstock. This pin it's offset, so this one plugs in here, this one's there. They're about that distance between. There's the pick guard. That might get a little bit fatter. There's the headstock. The headstock has to fit in there because this lines up with the middle. The middle of this lines up right with the edge of the guitar, so that needs to be in the middle. And that, notice that moves over, and that forces my headstock to get a little bit smaller and moved over. Because there's a little bit of space in between, so I need that space in between here. That distance there looks good. So that looks pretty good. Then this, now I'm adding more detail, you can see as well, because some of these details might help me break things up and see these structural relationships. So that all looks pretty good. That looks good. The relationship between this and this, I think this goes back a little bit further. Like I'm looking at that, how that lines up to the middle there. Checking the angle on this, it lines up with about this. So that tells me where the crutch starts to curve. And then looking at the curve itself, looks like it lines up with this. So it goes out to here. And then I get that. The headstock touches pretty much there. And we have that handle. This needs a little bit more space from there. So now I'm starting to have to make some changes. The cello's going to have to get bigger in the back. It's going to have to move back just a little bit further from what I had. And this thing here is going to move over a little bit. Overlap that a little bit more. So I wasn't terribly off. Then also checking the bottom of this is straight across, so I need to make sure that thing all fits into like that. So it's going to be tilted a little bit along that line. And I'm still only at 8 minutes. Watching the clock here. If you go past 10 minutes setting one of these up, you're probably spending too much time. And this is a complicated image. There's a lot going on in here. And I'm still able to get a pretty good assessment of it. The problem is people get too committed to the drawings too early on. They're trying to go get all of the detail of everything too early on. That'd be like showing up on a first date and then asking the person to marry you. Don't be a clinger with your drawing. Don't ask it to marry you. Spend some time getting to know it. Okay, I had to refine where that was at. Now that I move this over, this whole thing needs to have a little bit more distance here. And then I'm checking where's the bottom of it in relationship to the bottom of this is about here. And the top of it's about here. So I need to make it a little bit shorter. And that looks about right. When I did that, now the curtain's going to have to move over. The curtain comes out from like about here. And the curtain's definitely going to have to move over here as well. My picture plane is about there. And from here, there's like a, this is useful. This is something we're going to talk about, but there's a shape in the background here created by this triangle. And I can see that the triangle on my paper is about the same. I think actually the crutch could be tilted a little bit more. But I can use those. Those are called negative spaces. Shapes in the background that I'm ignoring. Same here. I can pay attention to this shape. And if it matches this shape, this will be our next set of assignments. But I'm looking at that now, so I'll tell you if this shape here matches this shape here, that also helps me determine that things are proper. All right, so that's the idea, is I've combined that loose notational gesture drawing, that way of mapping things down easily, with this idea of looking at structural information. Is the top of this lined up with the top of that? Nope. And it's about the same amount of offset on my drawing. You don't actually necessarily have to make the lines. It doesn't hurt to make a few of them, but checking information like that, this lines up pretty straight with this. Yep, in my drawing it's like that. Great. If not, then I know I'll need to move it over here. So it's like one of those games where you've got in a magazine and you're looking at what's the difference between the two images, and then if what's over here doesn't match what's over here, that tells you where you made a mistake. And once you know that you made a mistake, it's easy to change it. If you go in and you spend too much time, like on that candlestick, and you just go in and that's the first thing you draw and you don't draw anything else, and you just get all the detail on the candlestick, you've mentally committed to it. You've spent a lot of time on it, and it's going to be psychologically difficult to go back and change what you've done. If you just don't care about how it goes at first, probably going to go better in the first place. And then if you have to make changes, you're going to be more willing to do so. Then when we get to this point, we've got everything in the right place. Now we can start to worry about detail, because we don't have to worry about placement. So we're taking a complicated problem, breaking it into simpler steps. I'm teaching you a number of ways of looking at the world, but I'm also teaching you a process. And the first step in the process is the quick, less than a minute, get it on there. The second stage in the process is just shift things around on the flat screen so that you know everything's in the right place at about the right size. From that point, then you can start to worry about the other things that we're going to be doing. So as we go through the semester, yes, these are all different ways of seeing and looking at the world, but they're also steps in a process, and you should never just be like, well, we did that assignment and now I'm never doing that again. This is how you should always start your drawings.